What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another lecture video. Today's lecture is one that I'm actually really excited about because I think that there are going to be a lot of you guys who will take something valuable from this video. Today we are going to be talking about which training split is right for you, the viewer. And there's going to be a lot of things that I talk about in this to help you guys identify which training split is going to be the best for you. This is without a doubt probably the most common question that I get asked on social media is, what training split should I do? What training split do I recommend? What do I think about such and such split? And so we're going to cover all of those things today, and we're going to cover a logical thought process that you guys can use to help determine which training split is going to fit you the best. So let's not waste any more time and let's go ahead and get right into it. Okay, so before we start actually talking about some of these training splits, there are a couple considerations and things that I want to go over. I think that these thought processes that I'm about to go over here are really important to understand so that you can make sense of what we're trying to do when we move from one training split to another, or we utilize one training split over a different one. Each training split has its own advantages and disadvantages, and there are specific scenarios in which I would recommend each individual training split. But before we get into those, I think we really need to understand these key points here so that all of the things that I say to follow make sense. So let's kind of go back in time right now, and let's pretend that we go back to a time where we have never been in the gym before. We've never once lifted a weight. The amount of stimulus that you would need in order to cause muscle growth in somebody like that is very, very small. Now, why is that? Because the weight training stimulus is something that is completely foreign to them. It's completely new. If you've never touched a weight in your life, you don't need to do a lot of work in the gym in order to send the signal to your body that says, holy shit, we need to grow and repair. Because you can do basically 1 to 2 hard sets of an exercise and be able to properly stimulate hypertrophy if you've never been training before. That makes a lot of sense, right? When you're new to the gym, it doesn't take a lot to get sore. It doesn't take a lot to make progress. Now, as you progress throughout your training career, the stimulus that will be required in order to send that growth signal is going to increase as your body gets more and more adapted to it. You will no longer be able to do 1 or 2 hard sets or train once a week or something along those lines and still be able to make progress, because that stimulus will no longer be sufficient enough to cause an adaptation. And so in order to increase that amount of stimulus that we're placing on our body, we have to increase our total workload. Now, we can either do this by adding in more hard sets, or we can do the sets that we are currently doing harder. Obviously, there's a hypothetical cap on how hard we can train, and there's also a hypothetical cap realistically with how many total sets that we can do. But the point being is that as we need to increase that stimulus, we must increase our workload in order to accommodate for that. As our total workload increases, our body's ability to recover decreases because we are asking more of our body. And so more enzymes, more food, more sleep, all of these things are all required to cause the recovery processes to occur. And so as workload goes up, recovery goes down. Those two things move independent of each other. You can't do more work and expect to recover better. You do more work, your recovery decreases. You do less work, your recovery increases. As your recovery capabilities decrease from the increased workload, you are going to have to alter your split in order to meet those recovery demands. You may need to add more rest. You may need to add more time in between sessions. Lots of different things that can be done in order to accommodate the fact that you don't have the same recovery capabilities as you used to. But the point being is that you have to adjust somehow, which means that as your your recovery capabilities decrease and total workload increases, your training split is going to have to change and adapt in order to meet those. You cannot continue doing the same training split as an advanced trainee that you were doing as a beginner, because the amount of stimulus that's needed is not the same in those two situations. The amount of workload needed is much higher for the advanced trainee, and so their recovery capabilities are limited because of that. And so you're really limited with what you can do with some of these training splits, and that's why they need to be adapted over time as you graduate and move up the ladder. Okay, so what is step one? What is the first training split that we should be starting our training careers off? Before I get into all of these training splits, I just want to let you guys know I will not be talking today about how to set up these training splits. Each one of these training splits on how to set it up could be a video on its own, and so I don't want to go into too much of a tangent on this video. Today we're going to be talking about the individual splits and what are the advantages and disadvantages of both and the thought processes needed to move up, but we won't be talking about how to set those up. Those are different videos for different days. Step one is if you are a beginner, you're somebody who has never been in the gym before, you're just starting to go to the gym, I strongly recommend that these people start off with a full body training split. And why is that? As I mentioned, if you're a beginner, the amount of work that you need to do in order to stimulate growth in a muscle is very small because the stimulus is completely novel to you. You can probably elicit that stimulus in 1 to 2 hard sets per muscle group, and this can usually be done in one movement. Now, why is this important to understand? If you only need to do one movement and you don't need to do a lot of sets of that movement in order to cause muscle growth to happen, this provides a really unique opportunity where we can train everything very, very frequently because we don't have to do large amounts of work in order for the stimulus to occur. And so that presents a huge advantage to us in terms of efficiency. We can train all of our muscle groups in one session, and it won't be a ridiculously long session because we're not doing very many exercises per body part, and we're not doing very many sets per exercise. So the full body training split is a perfect way for beginners to get in the gym, get the amount of work done that they needed to do, and then get out of the gym and then focus on recovery. What I also like about the full body training split is because you're training your muscle groups extremely frequently, you're doing your exercises extremely frequently. And when you're a beginner, you don't really know how to move and you don't really know how to execute your lifts properly. When you go into the gym for the first time and you try to do a bench press or a squat or a deadlift, I mean, it's terrible. It's absolutely horrible. And then as you go on and on and on and on, you get better at moving. You learn all the little cues. You learn how to position your body, how to brace, things along those lines. But the more frequently that you do the exercises, the better that you are going to get at them. I like to use Olympic weightlifting as a perfect example for this. A lot of Olympic weightlifters will do their major movements every single day, 7 days of the week. They may only 2 or 3 of those times use actual load, and then 3 or 4 times they may only, let's say overhead squats. They may do 3 overhead squat sessions a week where all they do is squat with the bar, the empty bar, no weight on it at all. All they do is learn technique, and that's because the actual learning process of learning a motor pattern and learning a movement is something that the more frequently that you do, the better you will get at it. Now, obviously, you can't add load to that every time. Like you can't do the same movement 7 days a week with load and still expect to progress those numbers and get better at those. But when it comes to actual technique and drilling home how to lift a weight, it's extremely beneficial to do that more frequently. And that's something that the full body training split provides you, is it provides people with the opportunity to squat, press, row, pull-ups, and things along those lines extremely frequently, because the full body training split, as I've talked about before, is very, very efficient. It combines a lot of things in one individual session. By combining everything in one individual session, that's obviously going to give us the ability to hit those muscles as frequently as possible. And the more frequently that we can train muscles, the more frequent that they have the opportunity to grow. Every time that you train a muscle is an opportunity for that muscle to grow. And so the goal is to train our muscles as frequently as possible, because that gives us the most amount of opportunities for growth to happen. And so it's the combination of all of those things that I believe makes the full body training split the most advantageous to a beginner. A beginner can go into the gym and do one quad movement, one hamstring movement, chest press, shoulder press, tricep press, and then maybe a pull down and a row movement for 1 to 2 hard sets each. Hit every single muscle group in their body, and then 2 days later, 3 days later, do that again. 2 days later, 3 days later, do that again, and just repeat, repeat, repeat. And if you have 2 people who are beginners at the same time, and you get one person who's training their muscles 1 time per week, and you get someone who's training their muscles 3 times per week, at the end of a year, the first person has only trained each muscle 52 times. The second person will have trained their muscles 156 times, so obviously 3 times more. Which of these people do you think is going to be bigger? Which of these people do you think has had more opportunities for growth to occur? I think the answer is pretty obvious, and that really is the main driving point of why I think beginners should be doing the full body split, is because it allows them to get the work done effectively and efficiently, get better at their movements as quick as possible, and also hit all of their muscle groups as frequently as they possibly can in order to really capitalize on those first couple years or first year or so in the gym. Okay, so moving on. At this point, you have done the full body training split for however long, let's just say a year, year and a half. At this point, you're probably going to be running into some issues with your training. The fact that you are doing major compound movements extremely frequently is now starting to have detrimental effects on your recovery. Over the course of the past year, year and a half of following the full body training split, you not only have gotten better at executing the movements in terms of your actual movement and execution, and you're more able to apply tension where you want to in the target muscle, but you've also increased the external load on those lifts, and so they're causing a lot more central nervous system fatigue, localized fatigue, things along those lines. And doing these big bang for your buck movements at such a frequent basis is no longer something that is actually benefiting you, because you've graduated past your newbie gain stage, and now your body is pretty comfortable with doing these movements, and so it's starting to really wear you down. And so going back to the considerations that I talked about on the second slide, the stimulus that is needed to elicit hypertrophy at this point has increased, because you've been training for a year, year and a half at this point, and you've been training properly, progressing your lifts and doing all of the things that I talk about. Your need for stimulus has increased because your body has adapted to the stimulus, which means that you will need to increase the workload that you are doing in the gym, which means that you can stay on this full body training split, and instead of doing 1 to 2 hard sets per exercise, maybe you can start doing 3 or 4, or maybe instead of doing 2 chest exercises for 1 to 2 hard, or excuse me, instead of doing 1 hard chest exercise for 1 to 2 sets, you do 2 for 1 to 2 hard sets. However you go about doing that, the fact of the matter is that workload is going to increase. And as workload increases, so will the importance of exercise variation. So kind of what I talked about at the beginning there, eventually you're going to get to a point where you're going to need to do, let's say 3-4 hard sets per exercise. And what may be more beneficial for you at that point is, instead of doing 4 hard sets on the barbell bench press, press, maybe you do 2 hard sets on the barbell bench press and then 2 hard sets on a cable fly. So something that is going to hit the same target muscles, but it's not going to leave the same level of fatigue that the barbell bench press was. Maybe it puts the muscle through a different portion of the range of motion, or emphasizes a different portion of the range of motion. Whatever reason it is why you would use multiple exercises over more than one exercise, the point of the matter is eventually you're going to get to a point where, in order to really make that volume more effective, it's going to be harder to pour it all into one exercise, and it's going to be easier and more efficient for you to break that volume up into different exercises. Now, if you were to do this in your full body training, you're very quickly going to find that your full body training split is going to be something that you can no longer recover from. And not only will it be something that you can't recover from, your full body sessions are going to start to get pretty long. So now if like you take that same full body training split that I talked about at the beginning, you do a quad movement, a hamstring movement, chest, shoulder, tricep press, and then a pull down movement, and then a row movement. And when you're doing 1 to 2 hard sets of these 7 exercises, that isn't really too difficult of a session. If you're doing 3 to 4 hard sets of each of these exercises, you're going to be in there for probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours. You're going to be in there for a considerable portion of time. And by the time you finish that workout, and then 2 days later, 3 days later, you go to repeat that workout again, you did so much work in that one individual session that you haven't recovered in time for the next time to do the full body session. And by the time you get towards the latter end of those 2.5-hour workouts, really the quality of work that you're doing is going to be significantly less than if you had just split that workout in 2 and done one part on one day and the next part on another day. And so that is all that the upper lower training split is that you're taking the full body training split and you're just separating a full body workout into 2 days, and you're separating the upper body from the lower body. By separating your training split into full body days, or excuse me, upper body days and lower body days, you do 2 things. You allow yourself to add more exercises and more sets in each individual session without running into junk volume. When you're doing just your upper body movements on one day, you can do 3-4 sets per exercise and occasionally do a couple different exercises per body part, and still only be in the gym for an hour to an hour and a half. It's very, very feasible to do that. And the second thing is that you increase the amount of time between each bout of training to allow for more recovery. So when you're training full body, say every other day, you're hitting each muscle every other day. So each muscle only gets maybe 24 hours of rest, maybe 48 hours of rest. If you switch to a split that's, say, upper lower rest, what you do is now, instead of having 24 hours or 36 hours in between each time you hit that muscle, now you get 48, now you get 72, depending on how long that you set it up and how long you rest for, things along those lines. But you are increasing the amount of time between each bout that you train each individual muscle, which allows for more recovery time, which allows you to do more work in each individual session, which at this point of your training career is something that is required because your body has adapted to the stimulus and you need to continue to up the ante on that stimulus. And so the upper lower training program is just the next logical progression from the full body split. We're just taking our full body workout and just splitting it into upper and lower days. After following the upper lower split for a while, you are still going to run into some of the problems that you ran into with the full body split. Eventually, you're going to have to increase workload and you're going to have to do more sets per exercise and or more exercises per body part in order to spread that volume across and make it more efficient and more effective for you. And so you need to break up your training split again. And so the next logical progression from here would be the push-pull legs or the Arnold split. The way that I see it, they're completely interchangeable. They're basically the same thing. But all that the push-pull leg split is taking upper-lower training, and now you're taking that upper day and you're you're splitting it into pushing and pulling movements. And some people will take their lower days and they'll split them into quad and hamstring movements. But that's all that the push-pull leg split is it is the next variation of upper-lower training that is just broken down into more focused and more specific exercises and more body parts. And you'll see on this slide that the only thing that I wrote was copy and paste, because all of the same thought processes and all of the same criteria that I said about upper lower, graduating from full body to upper lower, applies here. The longer that you train on upper lower, the harder that it's going to be able to recover from that, because you're going to get stronger. It's going to be harder to progress your lifts. You need more rest in between each session, and you need more stimulus in order to elicit growth. And so you need to provide that to your body by giving it more rest. All the push-pull leg split is let's say you do push-pull legs rest, push-pull legs rest, push-pull legs rest. Now, instead of hitting your chest every 48 hours or 72 hours or however you set up your upper lower split, now you're giving yourself 3, 4, sometimes 5 days in between each time that you train that muscle, which, as I mentioned in the upper lower, allows you to recover more, which allows you to train more and train harder, which is required, because by the time you get to the push-pull legs or Arnold split, you should be a relatively advanced trainee. You should have put in a good amount of time following full body. You should have put in a good amount of time following the upper lower split. Push-pull legs is an extremely common split that a lot of people are doing right now, but I personally think that this push-pull leg split is something that is more reserved for advanced trainees. This is something that you need to earn the right to do. You need to earn the right to get strong enough and be able to train hard enough to where you need to take 3, 4, 5 days between each time you hit a muscle in order to allow recovery to happen. And then I'm going to add a final category, which I call advanced plus, and this is the bro split. So this is the typical hitting body parts 1 time per week, and then obviously waiting a week or so until you hit that muscle again. And in my opinion, the only people who should be following this split are high level physique athletes, either professional bodybuilders or national level bodybuilders who are right on the cusp of turning pro, and they just need to improve 1 or 2 specific muscle groups in order to allow that to happen, in order for them to earn their pro card. Those are the people, in my eyes, where it makes the most sense to be following a bro split, because they need to put so much individual attention into one particular muscle group, and they have been training for so long. Most of the people that you see at the IFBB pro level or at the national level who are close to turning pro have been training from anywhere from 8 to 15 years. They're very, very, very advanced trainees. And so the amount of stimulus that they need in order to cause growth is higher than what it would be for people who aren't as advanced as them. And so they do need to have very focused training sessions where all that they do is focus on one specific body part and just completely focus on annihilating that with a bunch of different exercises, a ton of sets, and then allowing time for recovery to occur so that they can repeat that process as efficiently as possible. But you also need to understand that as they become more advanced, it becomes harder and harder to recover, because they're getting stronger and stronger and stronger and needing to do more and more and more work. And so the time in between each individual bout of training needs to be longer. You can see where a lot of people, I think, are missing out on a lot of growth and opportunity if they're starting off their training career training with this bro split, which a lot of people are doing, or they're starting off training with push-pull legs. These are people who could hypothetically be training their muscles every other day and growing every other day and training their muscles, 150, 200 times a year, 3 to 4 times a week, and making tons of progress, taking advantage of the newbie gains. but instead they're following what their favorite influencer or pro is doing, but they're not realizing that that person has 10 to 15 years in the game. And the reason why they're following that bro split is because it is an absolute necessity for them. But for beginners, it's absolutely the farthest thing from a necessity. I think it's actually a really good way to not take full advantage of your beginner years. You'll notice that in all of those slides, I did not specify a portion of time or a period of time, how long that you should be on these splits. I don't say you should follow full body for 1 year. You should follow upper lower for 2 years. And so that will probably raise a question for a lot of you guys. How will I know when it's time to move up the ladder? And the answer to that question is that your logbook will tell you when it's time to move up to the ladder. When you're following full body training and you can no longer come into the gym and progress your lifts session after session after session because you're so tired and you're under recovered and you're under fatigued, that is a really good indicator that you need more rest, and so you need to break your training up a little bit more. But if you're continuing to take progress every single time that you go in the gym and do full body, there is no reason to change your split. You are literally following the picture perfect scenario. Every time you go in the gym, you're getting better and better and better and better. And that's the thing that's going to lead to muscle growth, is getting better in the gym. And so your logbook will let you know when it's time to move up. When you're following the upper lower split, and let's say you structure your upper body days where you do your pressing, your push work at the beginning and then your pull work at the end. When you start to notice that upper body day after upper body day after upper body day, you can come in and you can progress your push work, but you can't progress your pull work because you're so tired by the time you get to the pull work that it's just impossible to progress your lifts. That's when you know that you need to add more rest so that you can attack your pull work when it's fresh by putting it on a different day. But this is really the biggest indicator that you guys will need to understand when it's time to move up the ladder. Your logbook will tell you that you need more rest. When you're not getting better at your lifts anymore, you're not getting stronger, or you're getting weaker, and you've tried deloading, you've tried taking rest, and just block after block after block after block, I can't make progress, I can't make progress, I can't make progress. That is when you will need to move up the ladder. But doing so prematurely, in my opinion, is wasted time, and it's wasted progress that you could be making. Another important question that I want to address is the idea of backtracking. If you are somebody who's watching this video and you've started off your training career, first year doing push-pull legs, first year doing the bro split, is it too late for you to go back and do full body and do upper lower? And the answer is absolutely not. And I do recommend that for a lot of people. I am somebody who's actually done this myself. When I first started training, I was following the bro split, and then by my second year, I started doing push-pull legs. Around my third year of training, I realized, man, I really missed out not doing full body training. So I went back to full body training, and very quickly I learned that I was a little bit too advanced for full body training, but then I moved into upper lower training, and I got a good year and a half of progress out of running upper lower training. And if you guys look at the program that I'm following right now, it's basically upper lower. I'm doing 2 lower body sessions and 2 upper body sessions a week. I just divide those upper body sessions into one is a pull day and one is a push day. They're not both full upper body days because I think at this point I'm a little bit too advanced for true upper lower training, but having a good hybrid between the two is something that I find has been working for me lately. And so this is something where you may not be as advanced as you think. I think all of us think that we're better lifters than what we really are. And I think all of us need to check our ego at the door and leave our pride at the door, myself included. I like to think that at this point I'm pretty good at lifting weights and I'm pretty good at recruiting my muscles. But every single day it seems I get on the internet and I see somebody and I'm like, holy cow, like this guy moves at a whole nother level. This guy is a lot better than me. So as advanced as you may think you are, there's a very good chance that you're not actually as advanced as you think that you are. Stepping back is also going to reinforce the basics, because every time that you move back down, say you're at push-pull legs and you move back to upper-lower, or upper-lower and you move back to full body, every time you move back down, the training split gets more and more simplified. Think about how simple a full body training split is. One quad movement, one hamstring movement, chest, shoulder, tricep, bicep, back, that's it. That's all that there is. Now think about how complex a pull session could be. 3 or 4 different back movements, 2 or 3 different bicep curls, 2 or 3 different rear delt movements, maybe some trap movements in there. Each time that you take a step back down the ladder, your training gets more and more simplified. And the more and more simplified that your training gets, the more and more basic it gets. The more and more you need to focus on just the basics. Bang for your buck exercises, progress your lifts, get enough sleep, recover in time for the next training session, repeat indefinitely. And anytime that we can take a step back and take a step back from the cloud of confusion that hypertrophy training can be, and we can make things more simplified, I always think that's going to be beneficial for the athlete. It's always really important for people to not get overwhelmed with what they're doing, because hypertrophy training can be extremely confusing. Lots of people out there are saying super scientific-y things and talking about stretch-mediated hypertrophy and all of this other super advanced stuff. And if you're somebody who is new to the gym, it can be very overwhelming and very concerning that you don't understand these things. And so anytime that you can take a step back, step away from the cloud, focus on the basics, and just really focus on the things that matter, that is going to be something that is beneficial to you 100%. Okay guys, I think at this point I've talked enough. I think it's time to kind of drive the main points home. So let's kind of wrap this up and conclude this a little bit. Your training split should match your experience level. The newer you are to the gym, the less work that you need to do in order to cause growth to happen, the worse that you are at actually performing the exercises. And so by doing them more frequently, you give yourself the more opportunities to grow, and you give yourself the more opportunities to get better at the movement. As you get adapted to that training split, you need to do more work. More work means that you need to do more rest. And so each move up the ladder is made with that goal in mind, to provide more rest and more recovery and a more targeted approach to training that muscle. How will you know when it's time to move up the ladder? Your logbook will tell you, because you can no longer progress the lifts that you're doing, and you need more recovery in order to get stronger. It's not something where you're just like, man, I wish I had more rest. You need it. You physically cannot make progress on the training split that you are currently doing, because you have outgrown it. You've gotten so good at it that you've mastered it. It's time to move up. And it is okay, and it's often recommended that you do take a step back to a more simplified training program, just to really refine the basics, really focus on the things that matter the most, and really drive home the main points of what training is. Progressive overload, put the tension in the muscle, recover, repeat. That's it. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Again, I think that this is one that a lot of you guys will hopefully take some value from. If that is the case, please let me know. If you guys learned anything, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. If there are any topics that you guys want to see a lecture made on, please leave them in the comments or send them to me in a DM. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and as always, take care of yourselves.